Hi, Foundry friends. This is Logan Ryan, Palantir for Deployed Engineer. Excited to be back with you on the Palantir Developers channel. Now, we've talked about workshop and application development on top of Foundry in a few different videos on this channel. You can check out the Foundry Reference Project series to see all of the components that go and lead up to building your first application. You can also check out a long-form developer desk side video that I did just a week or two ago where we go really in depth about putting together an application in Workshop, as well as actions and the other ontology components that go into it. But I wanted to talk about something a little bit different in our video today. I wanted to talk about design. How do you make an application using Workshop that actually looks beautiful and functions well and demonstrates some nice design practices? So without too much further ado, let's dive in. We're going to talk about some general design principles. We're also going to talk about some design principles that come into play specifically when building on top of Foundry. And yeah, let's dive in. So this one's actually going to be a little bit more of a presentation. We'll be looking in the second half at an actual before and after. We're going to take an example application that demonstrates some design anti-patterns, and then we're going to look at fixing them. But first, I just want to talk about UI and UX design at a slightly higher level. What are the things that we want to think about when we're building an interface for our users? Oh, right. I forgot that this deck included the intro. So there you go. Hi, I'm Logan, Forward Deployed Engineer at Palantir. And yeah, we're going to look at redesigning and improving a workshop module. But let's talk about these design principles first. Okay, a couple of big picture ideas, right? Our users are going to be coming to an interface with an intent. They have some story, they have some motivation, some task they're looking to accomplish. And we always want to keep that intent in mind as our users, as we design our interfaces. We want to make it easy for them to accomplish their goals, and maybe secondary or tertiary things we want to make, a little bit less discoverable, right? They're not the primary intent. So we're going to think about some of these design principles through that lens of our user story. And if you want a little bit more guidance on how to think about user stories or capturing these intents, the documentation that we have in our use case lifecycle actually has a pretty good take on this, right? So if you look at the use case lifecycle here, this idea about functional requirements, how do we capture the requirements of our application and talk about them in terms of kind of user stories or succinct formulations of what we expect a user to do in that particular use case. These can be things that are really helpful to document as you're going through the design and architecture project process for your use case. Okay, but that said, let's come back to the principles at play here. So the first one we want to think about is layout and hierarchy. We want to think about how our users are going to scan and read this interface. And there's a natural, at least for Western languages that read from left to right and top to bottom, you want your UI to read in the same way. So when we look at something that's a typical workshop or even kind of Foundry style application, we're going to see, start by scanning our top header and then our left sidebar. Now we move into this right content area. We've got a header. That's where our eyes are naturally going to go. And then we're going to scan through the main content. So we want to think about these areas and this kind of left to right, top to bottom progression as the natural flow of our user's gaze, and use that to match up with the type of content we're going to put in those locations. Okay, we also want to think about this idea of affordances. So in design, an affordance is any indication on an object or an interface that tells the user how to interact with it. A canonical example is the shape of a door handle on a door that you're going to walk through. You can look at the door handle, and if it's designed well, you know if you're supposed to push that door or you're supposed to pull it. And you shouldn't need a sign or a little cartoon or something to tell you, because the shape of the door handle should guide you to do the correct action of either pushing or pulling. Now, one of the ways that these affordances show up in Workshop and in designing our interfaces is this idea of intents. You'll see on button groups and in conditional formatting, we can assign colors and convey meaning. So often, we can confuse users if we're using the wrong intents or adding too many of them, right? We want to match up intents with the kind of natural conveyance. And again, these are things that are going to come from expectations users have of other tools, other software that they're familiar with. They're kind of common patterns, and you want to make sure that you're thinking about those. So here we can use particular spots of color to draw attention. We were thinking about the user stories. We want to draw the user's gaze to the most relevant part, the actions they're going to most commonly be trying to take, and then maybe some of the less common actions or less common workflows, we want to make them a little bit more muted. We also want to surface the right intent at the right place. So here we can see a workflow that has a couple of steps, and as we're going through the steps, we want to combine them, combine our intents here, kind of in our secondary dropdown, so that we can, understand, okay, is this something I need to be cautious about taking as an action? Is this something I want to draw the user's attention to? Or is this just kind of an action the user's going to scan through the list and need to actually read the text to understand what's going to happen when they take it? And then here, another idea of an affordance, right? If you're taking a destructive action, if you're making some change or some edit, maybe you want to put in a confirmation, right? You want to let the user understand clearly that this thing they're doing is destructive or making a change, and you can put that right in front of them and force their attention to be drawn, and then also give them a chance to back out. And this can be a nice pattern as well if you do have this type of change that is, it's not easy to undo, right? You want them to be thoughtful and intentional when making it. And then here you can just see a little bit of a case study of what it might look like if you've gone for an intent explosion, right? Our top option, we have 5 buttons. Everyone has an icon and an intent, and my eye doesn't know where to go. It doesn't scan them because my natural scanning is going to be left to right, but I'm also getting grabbed by different colors and different icons. And what ends up happening is I can't find what I'm looking for. I have to look at each button and read it to understand where I should go. Whereas in the bottom example, you can see we've consolidated some of these into a drop-down menu for the secondary actions. And the main things that I have are this assign and apply action. And now I know right where my eye goes. It goes straight to the apply button. And then I can scan from there left to right if I'm looking for something that isn't that primary intent. Again, this is just reinforcing the more that you add, the harder it's going to get to find anything at all in your interface. We want our interfaces to be kind of as minimal as they need to be to allow our users to accomplish their goal. Here's another little case study just looking at the idea of repetition. In the image we see details about these airplanes, and each property of the airplane reinforces, yes, this is a property of an airplane. But we know that we're within the context of a list that says airplanes at the top. We're within the airplane manager application. We have the word airplane in the title. So we're just getting beat over the head, the idea that this is an airplane. And we really just don't need that repetition. When we're using Foundry and in the context of an object view and its properties, we're generally going to have context about the type of thing that we're looking at. And so we can just rename our properties, make them shorter, more concise. And the user here, obviously this is the airplane status because it's being displayed, under the airplane header model. Cabin pressure, we've actually consolidated from a separate pressure. And then over here, you can see we have the pressure and the pressure unit were separate properties. We brought those together for the display purpose, at least, so that you can, more easily and compactly scan this. And then here, predictability. This is one that I think is huge and can take a little bit of thought when you're building a workshop application, which is users come to your interface not in a vacuum. They've used lots of other software, lots of other tools. They have expectations about how an interface is going to react, and you want to match those expectations. You don't want to try and build a whole new language or set of concepts for how someone's going to interact with your tool. And at the same time, you're going to need to build things that fit with the way that Foundry works within the framework that Workshop makes available. So here we want to strive towards this predictability so that users know what's going to happen when they do something within your interface. And this little case study looks at a single button. We currently say view this object. It doesn't actually, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to open a drawer? Am I going to open a new tab? Here, we can add an icon, a little bit of an affordance that says, okay, this might redirect me, but I don't actually know if I'm going to open the object view or maybe just go to a different page within this current application. And then here we can change our text a little bit, open in object view or open in Explorer with our external facing arrow. And now it's going to be really clear what happens when I click this button. And then a final piece to keep in mind from a design perspective, a layout perspective, is the scale of your project. Workshop wants you to build nice responsive layouts. And so we could do something like this. This is a really common starting place. It's even prompted when you create a new Workshop app, right? But you get a left panel and then you have a main content area. And then here we can see that content area divided into rows and then subdivided into columns with content from different widgets placed into those sections. But this doesn't leave us much room if our application grows. What if we need to add a filter panel? What if we want to add more pages? You can see as we add those, our application starts to get a little bit cramped, right? We don't have built into our layout a way for this application to kind of breathe and expand. So if we're doing this dashboard style tool where the main body of our content is going to be visualizations and widgets for understanding the context of our workflow, then maybe I want to have a flows layout for the middle of my page. You can see with this negative space around my central content, all of a sudden there's a little bit of breathing room. And I could see, well, okay, if I do need to add a bunch more content, now that content has vertical space to flow, right? It becomes a scrollable area. And I also have within the header of that main content area, room for secondary tabs, in addition to the kind of page level tabs at the top of the application. So I can still, within this view, as my application grows, the user can still scan left to right, top to bottom, and understand the organization of this tool. Okay, so those are some concepts to keep in mind. There's nothing particularly Foundry-centric about them. You can go out on the web and find all kinds of great application development or application design, UI and UX courses, different ways of approaching it, different ways of thinking about it. But that's just to introduce you to a few of the concepts you might want to keep in mind as you build an interface in Workshop. So now let's do something a little bit more practical. Let's do a case study looking at an actual Workshop application and then refactoring it and making it a little bit more usable, following some of these principles that we've just talked about. We're going to look at the reference example applications. So we're going to use the same aviation industry data with flights and route alerts that we've used in some of the other videos. And you'll actually find these reference examples, both of the before and the after Workshop modules, available in your Foundry training and resources project. So if you do want to go and poke around at the live versions and see how these actually work, they're built out as real applications in that reference project. So at the end, I'll show you where you'll be able to find those. But here we go. Here's our starting point. We've got a route operations monitor dashboard. The idea here is, like we've set up in some of the other examples, and a group of users who need to monitor the performance of flights along particular routes. And we have a pipeline that's generating some of these alerts with different priorities and different statuses. The users need to review them and take some action, make some recommendation before resolving them. So the intent of this particular application is for that regular monitoring. Users are coming here to identify what's changed, to identify what's the highest priority for them to action right now. And right off the bat, you can see that this has an issue of its hierarchy and of its scale, right? I come here and I start scanning left to right from the upper corner, and the first thing I run into is a whole bunch of buttons, and then I come down and I find a filter, and then I'm over into this 4-column layout of different alerts, and if I look across the titles, I can see, okay, these are alerts that are in different status categories, kind of by priority. Then my eye jumps down to these charts at the bottom. The charts are also kind of grabby, and so I don't know whether to scan towards them or to immediately look at the charts, but the charts don't have a lot of context with them, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking like. And then I finally get to this bottom right corner, and there's some more stuff down there. So let's break this down a little bit more and see how the principles that we just talked about are reflected or not reflected in this application. So the first thing are these buttons that are just kind of scattered around. I've got some in the upper right and then this one down in the lower left. They all have primary intents in blue other than the route details, and they're mixing together things that are going to, be part of my workflow. So like view route details is something I'm going to want to do after I've made a selection somewhere, like to go and drill in and find out more about a particular route and its alerts. But then the Explore Global Flight Operations Overview and the selected aircraft are going to be kind of taking me into a different workflow, more analytical or exploratory. And then down at the bottom, this blue view excluded routes is just another kind of off-ramp from this application. Even though it's not particularly clear what will happen there. Am I going to go to a new tab? Am I going to update my filters? Am I going to open a whole new page, or go out into Object Explorer? So we definitely would want to clean up this and make it more clear what these actions are, what their intent is. Another one here is just as I scan, I've got a lot of capitalized text in my headers, and without any context, capitalization is just hard to read. It's just easier to read text that is in regular casing. And so in general, for titles, section titles, and things like that, you want to use regular casing. You can capitalize the first letter in camel case style, or you can just use sentence casing, as you would in regular written text. And if you do want to, draw some more attention to it, you can use the metric cards so that there's some context from coloring or other affordances that's going to help the user, identify, hey, alerts are more important than warnings, which are more important than the OK column, and those will help our users as well. Down here, like I mentioned, we've got these charts, but I can read them and they tell me about the priority level of the different route alerts. And then I also have this one that's the average elapsed time for the selected routes. I'm not exactly sure which selection that refers to. Is it the ones that I've clicked on, or is it the ones that I've filtered down to? There's not enough context here for me to use these as part of my triage process. It seems like they're kind of in here for more of a dashboarding or visualization intent, and maybe they should actually be part of a different view. My intent for this interface is very operational. I want my users to come here and quickly find the route alerts that they need to take action on. And these charts are much more contextual, high level, and looking across all of our routes and all of our alerts. So maybe we should put them over into more of a dashboard view. And then down here in the bottom right, this is actually super important. This is my high priority alerts organized, in the most concise way. There's 6 of them. This is actually super important. This is what I want some of my application to be about, but it's tucked over here, taking up, maybe 10% or less of the screen real estate. So we'll find a way to refactor this and make it more prominent. Similarly, we've got the opposite, this column of the ones that are okay and the ones where there's no issue at all. It's going to be really rare for my users to need to interact with these. The whole intent is to find the ones that need the most pressing action taken. But we've given these 50%, the same amount of screen real estate as the alert level and the warning level. So that doesn't really make sense. We can just take these completely out, get this screen real estate back, and use it to focus on the core intent of this application, of this interface. And we can make it accessible so that you can off-ramp from this tool into the Object Explorer with a view that'll let users find this data, interact with it if they need to, but it doesn't need to be built into this more targeted interface. And then here, when we actually look at the route details, to take our actions, we're confronted again with we have something that's super useful. First off, this chart down here does actually tell us a lot of information. It tells us about the service history and the performance history for the route in question. And that's exactly the kind of information that I do need to know as the analyst who's coming in to decide what to do with this alert. And I can see in the case of this one, well, it's actually not very easy for me to know which one I'm looking at. There's nothing around, in this panel that tells me what route. There it is in the alert description, kind of down at the bottom, RSW to MKE, historically averaged 55.67 per month, but had no flights over the past month. So the number of flights per month has completely dropped off. And I can see that reflected here in the service history, right? On the up until April, there was a lot of regular service on this route. And then all of a sudden there's just, one flight per week, it looks like. In the through June, and then none at all after June. Like we know our data actually goes through July, and we can see also overlaid the performance. So this is really valuable, but it's also just shoved in here as part of this route operations monitor interface. This visualization is so valuable. I actually would want to see it for every route anywhere that I looked at it. So another thing we want to keep in mind with building on top of Foundry is we have this idea of interface components and reusing portions of our interface by putting them into an object view. So one big piece of our refactoring, when we get to that, we'll talk about it more, is going to be factoring out portions of this interface and moving them into the appropriate object view so that there's reusable both content so that users can see this in any application, and also more familiarity, that users know what they will see whenever they're looking at a route or a route alert. So we're going to want to factor this out and make it something reusable because it is so valuable. Again, we've got this kind of intent overload, difficult to scan. These full width buttons are not very familiar. Most users are going to expect buttons to kind of have a fixed width. It's kind of strange to have this button that takes up half the width of the page. So again, familiarity, users seeing and scanning easily and understanding what's going to happen when they take these. Our intents at the top are okay, right? We've got a blue one and add the manual alert, delete alert is in red, edit is in kind of orange. But again, those aren't going to be equally common. The most common thing is probably not even shown here, which is to change the status. Like I don't necessarily think of, changing the status as an edit to this. I think of editing, I'm going to go in and change some of the property values, but we probably want to give the user a really clear button to click that says, yep, okay, I need to update the status of this. I need to change it from, pending triage, and I need to assign it to somebody and update the status to open, right? That's the thing that I think is going to be most common. And I don't see that at all here in my buttons. And then again, it took me a minute to even find which route it was that I'm looking at. The display of the metadata and the properties for this route and its alerts aren't clear at all. So let's take a look at a proposed solution. Now, there's still a lot going on in this application. In fact, it's even more dense in terms of information than the one we were just looking at. But notice how if we start from the upper left and scan it, we get a much better read of what's important and how things are organized. So I start in the upper left. This is the route operations view. I immediately see, okay, I've actually got a couple of tabs in this application, and I've started on the route status view. And this is part of that refactoring. We took those charts, that were immediately grabbing us, but not having context, and we were pulling them over into that overview. So now, that's in a separate page. It has its own space. And we're just focused on the route status within this view. And then, I come down to my main content area, and my eyes start on the left where I see my filters. And all of a sudden, I see something really clear in blue grabbing me at the top. I'm currently looking at the high priority routes, right? And I can see, okay, cool, I could go to the medium or the low, but those are tucked out of the way. I'm defaulting to showing the user what is most important, and that's these that have received the high priority. And then below that, I have some more user-defined filtering. So if I'm an analyst who is looking at a particular region or particular routes, I can filter to those quickly, and I have at the bottom the option to add a filter to kind of go further. And then again, I scan across, I have a clear place for my results, and then most of the interface is dedicated to showing me the details of each individual route. So again, we'll break this down into a little bit more, right? We've got the new header section where we've factored things apart. We've got this filter sidebar on the left that helps us understand exactly what we're looking at and why, as well as giving us the flexibility to further define what we need to see for our daily work, whatever it is today that I need to dig into. And I can collapse this out of the way as well. So once I've done my filtering step, once I'm looking at the results that are going to be interested to me, I can get that screen real estate back, tuck my filters out of the way, because I don't need to iterate on them anymore. And we also have our results now consistent in one place. There's not multiple columns to scan. I've got one column for my results, and it just gives me what I need to quickly look through and select one of these routes to get more details on. It also means that I only have one active selection within my application. In the previous version with 4 columns, I could have an active selection in each of those 4 different columns, and that presents not only a UX challenge of helping the user understand what it is they are currently interacting with, but also an architecture and implementation challenge, because you then need to, within your workshop app, handle the fact that there are going to be different active selections, and the user's intent, understanding what it is they're trying to do, is going to be more muddled, because you have these active variables that are going to be associated with all of these different lists. So where possible, it's a cleaner design to have a single list, and then the filters and other interactive elements of your application are going to dictate what shows up in that results list. And I've got a really clear action at the bottom, open all in Object Explorer, and I'm automatically getting the details. I don't have to take another action to view the details, because every time I click on an element within this results list, I'm getting all of the details here on the right. And instead of a popover panel, instead of a drawer in Workshop, I just have a single object view widget, and I'm reusing the example data route object view. So I've taken that chart that was super valuable, that showed me the route performance and the route service history all in one consolidated view, and I've put that here into the object view. I've also given a map so I can quickly orient, okay, is this a long haul route? Is it a little short route? I get some context about, where this route actually is in the world, and some top level metrics that are shown. And then here at the top, I've got my alert details. I can see, I guess we'll go through it in order. So first off, I can see I get a bunch of other contextual tabs here. I'm defaulted to the details view, which is the one that's going to be helpful in the context of this application, but I can also deep dive into the flight performance tab. I can look at the carriers tab to understand the service history, or I could go kind of back out to the overview and get the higher level context. And again, this is what I get by reusing the object view rather than building some, custom view of this route that's embedded within my main application. So here, anytime I'm looking at this, if I'm looking at it within Object Explorer, if I'm in another application that's also using this object view, it's going to be familiar to my user what interactions I can take. And that means, for instance, that I'm always going to find the alerts, both the route and the flight level alerts that are active for this particular route here. And I'm always going to have the same set of actions up in the upper right corner, right? There in green, resolve alert. And then if I drop it down, I can have my other actions to, maybe edit it, delete it, take some, administrative action if I'm an admin, but those can all be tucked out of the way because the main thing I'm going to be doing here is, investigating it, resolving it. When I hit that resolve button, I'm going to be prompted to leave a comment or say why I'm resolving it, what actions I took and things like that. Or on the left hand, I can go into the alert details in more and get all of their information. So we'll see that in a second. Again, reusing an object view. And then down here below, we have a really concise view of context, right? So when I'm looking at the JFK to LAX route, what is it that I need to know? Well, I know that it averages, 380 minutes and that it's a really busy route that's got a huge number of flights. I can see from my chart that it has 5 different carriers over time who have been flying it, and that its performance history over the year kind of has this seasonality to it, where it's slower in the wintertime and a little bit quicker on average through the summer, but it's also pretty spiky. So I can get all of this context, just by scanning what's going on here, and then I can also expand this chart. Right now, it's only taking up about a quarter of my screen real estate. And it'd be awfully nice if, I want to see this in more detail. Can I make it bigger? Yep, I've got a button here to expand it out. And if we do go ahead and click on that Open Alert Details, I again get another panel overlay. And now I'm kind of at the end of my workflow. I've gone all the way from, the left of my application where I'm filtering and triaging and zooming in on a set of routes. And then I've looked at the details for one route. And now I'm looking at this individual route alert. I'm looking at this alert that was generated about the variance in the flight time for this particular route. And I can see that at the top. Again, I'm in the context of an object view. So this is going to be the same thing I see if I look at my route alerts in any other application or in Object Explorer. And I've got the, right at the top, JFK to LAX variance is 1.9 times average. I can scan through and quickly see that the flights on this route have a high variability in how long they take. Why is this a high priority? It's higher than any, there's nothing else that's kind of similar to it. I can see that there are other route alerts, other flight alerts. And then this is where I can have, a comment workflow, see if someone else has been working on this and choose, to update the alert or take my other alert actions. And now we've got the most important question of any UI UX design focus, which is dark mode or light mode. And in Workshop, it is just a click away in the Workshop settings to kick the entire application over into dark mode and change the look and feel completely. Give it a try. It can make your application stand out if you want to see it in a different light. And so with that, I'm going to wrap things up here on the UI UX side of things. Like I mentioned, you can go into the Foundry training and reference project and find these applications. If you do a search on your Foundry instance for before and after, you'll be able to find the resources that way. And I encourage you to go and play around with these, check out how they work. And I hope this has been some inspiration for your workshop projects, giving you some ideas on how you can both take the general principles of good UX design and bring them into Foundry as you work within Workshop. And then also some ideas on the Foundry specific things, particularly this idea of componentizing your interfaces using object views and then composing them within a single application so that there's some things that are going to be very intent driven and very custom for your particular Workshop app, but then when it comes time to show the user a thing, to show them the route, to show them the alert, you can reuse that object view so there's familiarity on the interactions and where to find the information that they need. And then also it lowers the cost of development for you and ensures that everyone's contributing to this same view of their data. So again, hopefully this is a bit of inspiration. Thanks for hanging out on the Palantir Developer channel, and we'll see you around in our upcoming videos.